Hey there, I'm Tim Wagoner, and welcome to another edition of Writing in the Dark. It's been a while since my last video. We're going to be talking about writing personal horror this time. The idea is that the more you can draw on your own fears, obsessions, weird experiences that you've had, weird thoughts you've had, weird dreams, whatever that are particular to you, the more impact they're going to have on your reader because your horror is going to be more original. It's going to be different. It's going to be unknown, which is one of the big factors in anything being scary to people. Before we talk about that, though, I've got a new book coming out from Flame Tree Press. It's called Hunter Called Night. Check out that cover. Isn't that awesome? If you've read my stuff before, you know what you're in for. If you haven't, if you like kind of cross genre stuff, I mean, this is a blend of weird fiction, extreme horror, action adventure, um, fantasy too, as a lot of my work is. So if you dig that kind of cocktail, you're going to like this book. So, personal horror. So, what we're talking about, like I said, is this idea that the more you can draw on yourself, the more when somebody sees your name like on a story or on a book in a table of contents of a magazine or anthology, they're going to know that what they're going to get is something different. Now, there are, of course, marketing concerns and genre conventions to think about. If you're going to be writing genre fiction, in a category romance, the lovers get together at the end. In a category mystery, we find out who done it at the end. But there's a lot of different ways to get to those places. And horror is a different kind of genre in that it is about the unknown. If it's one of the reasons why people wonder why they don't get scared by stuff like they did when they were kids. It's like you've seen so many, slasher movies, vampire movies, whatever, that you know what to expect. So they don't really have an impact. They still can be fun to watch, but in terms of horror that, kind of digs into people's brains and kind of unsettles them, has an impact that's memorable, probably not. So what you want to do is try to find the kind of topics inside yourself, the ideas, the feelings, the experiences that will lend themselves to writing, really effective horror. So when somebody reads one of your stories, it's not just going to be a horror story. In my case, it would be like a Tim Wagner story. And in your case, it would be, some horror writer stories. So the idea behind this, there's an old famous quote from Aristotle that the only way to get to the universal is through the particular. And by that, what that means is that you can tell somebody the word sadness. The word sadness should be universal, right? It's the entire concept of sadness supposedly embodied in one word, but it doesn't work. It's too broad. But if you talk about like, or maybe show, like maybe it's a painting or a photograph or something, you show an image of somebody looking out a window. Maybe it's kind of a gloomy day outside. Maybe it's raining. And they got their arms crossed kind of on the windowsill and they're kind of leaning like this, and trying to fix the good angle from my head here. They're just looking sad. Um, you don't have to say sadness. People will get it. And you'll probably, if you're painting, you'll use colors that evoke sadness too. And it doesn't matter what age the person is in the image. Person could be young, they could be an adult, they could be middle aged, they could be a senior. Um, and you might get different feelings of sadness from those people at different ages. But if you were a young person looking at an image of an old person being sad, and you never have experienced being an old person being sad, doesn't matter. You're still going to connect to that particular image and you will still connect to memories, thoughts, actual emotions, of sadness inside you. And so that's what you want to do. You want to try to pull out something particular from yourself that will evoke the universal in your readers. And this is true for any kind of fiction, but I think it's really important for horror because of that sense of unknown that I really think that we need. People just need to not feel safe with your stories. And I don't mean that they'll literally be traumatized. I just mean it's not safe in the sense that they're going to get exactly what they expect because they don't know what to expect. So, one of the things you want to do, and kind of a caution here at the beginning, is you want to dive into yourself, dig into yourself as far as you are comfortable doing. You do not want to traumatize yourself just for, um, you know, the technique, a writing technique. And, I've been very fortunate in my life. My life has not been all, champagne and roses by any means, but it's also not been hard like a lot of people's lives are. I haven't had a lot of terrible things happen to me. I know plenty of people who've been traumatized by all kinds of different things. And so I would, if they were wanted to write horror, I would tell them, you dig as far as you want and you write whatever you want, but you do not have to re-traumatize yourself by going into yourself and going through memories that are of abuse or of just grief or um, anything, any kind of negative emotions or experiences that you've had that would be, psychological and emotional scars or wounds that haven't healed yet. You don't have to do that. So even though we're talking about personal horror, you go as far as you are willing to go. Now, if you go farther, you might get some release, you might get some catharsis, um, but don't re-traumatize yourself. So one of the things you can do is you can look to your dreams. I had a friend in college who kept a dream journal, and he'd been doing it since he was in middle grade, middle school, and he could remember like 17, 20 dreams a night. Supposedly we dream a ton and we just don't remember a lot of it in the morning. So we'd write them down first thing in the morning, before they evaporated from his brain. And he had those to draw on. He wasn't a writer though. For him, this project was just about getting to know himself and aren't dreams weird and isn't the human psyche weird. I tend not to do that. I tend, because I don't remember my dreams really well. And when I do dream, they're kind of boring. They're just sort of everyday stuff, weird stuff. Like I'm trying to find the bathroom or, oh no, I don't remember the lines to the play I'm going to be in. But if you have really vivid dreams, like my wife does, she has very vivid dreams. It might be worth, diving in there. So think about keeping a dream journal. Um, Something else you can do. This is a technique I learned from an article interview I wrote with Stephen King right after The Shining was published. So he was famous, but not super duper famous yet. And the writer asked him, how do you get your ideas? And he said, "Oh, I just look at something and I tell myself something is wrong with that. Something is seriously wrong." So you could pick anything. And you could pick the most innocuous thing. Like I got a microphone right there, got a camera up there, I got another light over there, um, got all my pop figures back there, different pictures. I could pick any one of them and tell myself something is wrong with it. I could pick my hat and tell myself something's wrong with it. And then start just brainstorming. Like, what could be wrong with my hat? Was it somebody else's hat before? Is it even really a hat? What's it doing on my head? What happens? I'm taking a video of myself. What happens when you take a video and you put it up on YouTube? Um, and just start thinking about what like different sinister things that might occur. So that technique works great. You can just jot down notes like until about a bunch of things. It could be in your environment, or you can just go like for a walk or a drive or whatever. Write some notes down and then go back and look at them when it's time for you to be looking for a story. Or if you're doing a novel, you might pull out several of them, three or four or five, 10, maybe, and put them together. I often do that with the notes that I have. Paying attention to the wonderfully weird world about you. We see all kinds of weird things all the time, but most of the time you'll see them and it's just kind of gone because you haven't written it down. The example I always use, if you've taken a workshop from me before, you probably heard this, and I may have used it in videos in the past, is that in the space of 1 week several years ago, I saw two men walking backwards at different times in different places. Um, I have no idea why. I didn't want to know. I didn't look it up on the internet because I didn't want to know. I wanted my own imagination to kind of, chew on that an image for a while. And eventually, years later, I needed to do a story for anthology, and I pulled that out. I just used one walking backwards man as the thread in that. And then it'd been years since I'd seen one, and then just a few weeks ago, I saw another. So walk. I don't know what they are. I don't want to know what they are. I just know they're out there. Got to watch out for them. So I write stuff like that down all the time in the notepad app on my phone. Or, like if I have to, I could do a voice memo or even call my answering machine at work and leave a message and then get it later. Um, but I've gotten so many great ideas from that. So if you don't do that already, I really urge you to do it. You can also take pictures of stuff and video that you might see. So you have that kind of reference later on. I'll do that too. When I'll see something really interesting, I'll take a picture of it so that I have it later on. And one of the things you can do too, and this is where you start digging into your own psyche and your own past. What were you afraid of at different times in your life? So This is an exercise from one of my How to Write books, Writing in the Dark, the workbook. So you run this through different patterns of your life. But here are some questions to ask yourself, and then you jot down ideas while you're doing it. What were you afraid of as a child? Do you recall any specific events in your childhood during which you were deeply afraid? Explore these questions for different life stages. Then you do it for however you want to break your life down, however far you've gotten so far. So preteen, teen, new adult, adult, new adults like from 18 to 25, middle age, senior, etc. And you can also divide it up into life stages, such as before marriage, before kids, after kids. Before, like I had testicular cancer when I was 31, and they caught it early. It's just fine. I've been fine ever since. But my life, in some ways, is before cancer and after cancer. Um, so you can do that too. But you're asking yourself, what were you afraid of then? Oh, and I skipped this before. Do you recall any specific events in your childhood or other times of your life during which you were deeply afraid? I think I skipped one line there. Um, and so you can draw on those things. Like the earliest I remember, my mom said that my sister and myself, when we were toddlers, one was afraid of band-aids, one was afraid of feathers. And it's such so little kids will be afraid of anything, but I've always tucked that away in the back of my head, waited. And a couple years ago, I wrote a story for Weird Tales called Feathers, where I was able to go ahead and create a story based on that fear. So you never know, when these lists will come in handy. So you can go deeper into yourself. You can write your responses as one word lists, short phrases, full sentences, complete paragraphs, whatever you like, whatever works for you. So you can write about a time or times when you, a friend, or a family member experienced what you consider to be true horror. And again, you do not need to re-traumatize yourself simply for a writing technique or writing exercise. Um, and it doesn't have to even be something that most people would think of traumatic. If you just experience true horror, that would be it. Um, okay, what's the worst thing you can imagine happening to you, happening to a friend, happening to a family member? Um, and then, once you've gone through these exercises, or if you've gathered a bunch of stuff like looking at the weird world around you and everything, when you're ready to go ahead and look for a story idea, that you read over what you wrote and do any of the responses. Did they spark story ideas? Do you see a pattern in the responses that suggest concepts or themes that you might use or return to in your work? For example, when I was 9, almost round, I did not because not a ghost. Um, but it was also the same year that I lost my first close relative. A great uncle died. He was like a second father to me. So big, year of dealing with death. So drowning, water, stuff like that shows up in my fiction a lot. Um, and so you may find kind of a speciality, that way. So I hope you found this helpful. If you're interested in checking out my books on writing, I'll put some information and links in the comments. Hope to hear from your comments. Do the like and subscribe thing if you want. I appreciate it. I'll see y'all later.